Hi, it's Karen from PortPrep, the Admissions Insider, and today I'm working with some students in my studio, learning how to do different things for their portfolios. And today I'm working with a student interested in getting into drawing and painting. She's very talented, and we're going to learn about some oil pastel techniques. So it gives her some more ways to express herself and explore different media in her portfolio. So I'm just going to shine the camera down on the work we're going to do. Okay, so, all right, can I get your sketchbook over here? Well, look, and you've got some nice oil pastels. So you have some, what is it? I always wonder how you say that name. Mungo. I think they're from Japan, I think. So these are decent, but I love what you got, this nice huge fat set. Yeah. So that's going to be fun to paint with. And so oil pastels can be really fun to work with because it's like painting, but it's like drawing too. So it's so easy. You don't have to clean up, right? You don't have to, take all the time to mix the paint. But I find that it's really helpful to have some good tips on how to use these things. I had a great teacher. I think I mentioned to you when I studied in Florence. For one summer, we actually had a German teacher, and she was really cool. She taught me a lot about composition and how to use oil pastels, because before that, I never really had a whole lot of luck in what I was doing. So one of the keys is to draw your darks first, but very softly. So you say you like portraiture, right? So let's see. So basically, I would do a tonal drawing, just looking at the pattern of shadow first, and only where the shadow is really dark. And I would actually use a black where it's really dark. Let's see. So try to see what I can do with just making up something here. So we look to see, and black is very powerful. What we're going to do is we're going to pull up on the blacks from underneath. So we want to just very softly, you can see I'm not pushing hard, right? And just looking at where is the major pattern of dark before we get going too far, right? So very soft. So the underside's under the brow, right? Under the eyelid, under the nose, right? Shadow. Upper lip, under the lower lip. This little plane under the side of the lips, right? And under the jaw, beside the jaw. So then we can get a little bit stronger beside the cheek and under the chin, right? Let's see, what else we can do with this person. So wherever the light's tilted away, like the planes of the face are tilted away, sometimes it's a good little thing to just look for in some resources, the shade and shadow, the shadow patterns on a face, right? And to, I think I might be crooked here. The other thing to watch for in portraits is that lines up. I'm going to have weird lines in my portrait. But we got a definitely skewy face. It's so hard to draw off to the side of something. I used to have trouble with that. So we're going to make a crazy looking portrait now. Maybe I'll have some fun with that and make the person look kind of nuts. And that's one thing that when the eyes don't line up, it creates sort of a feeling of the person's not quite right. You know, they're a little disturbed. So maybe we'll give them some crazy hair too. So and under the hair, just beside, we tend to get some stronger darks. So we might push a little harder on the black. But what we're looking for is to just get some of the basic dark tones. So in here, we want to find what's the shape of the head, what's the shape of the hair. Right? Pretty crazy looking portrait. Under the jaw is dark, right? And so then I'm going to add some black back here. Really small face, big eyes. Really crazy looking, huh? So we start with those black darks where we want it really dark. And then we might add a cool color for the other shade area. So this is a little bit of information on painting portraits with oil paint. So do you see what the artist has done here? Right, where they've painted in the dark side of the face and the light side of the face, but you notice that the light side of the face is in mid values and like light mid values, and the dark side of the face is dark values, right? And they do this sort of basic thing and including some of the background around. And then over in the layers, they add in lighter values in the dark side and the light side, right? So we do a bit of an underpainting first. Or this is a bit akin to glaze painting in a way, what they used to do in the Renaissance. You do a tonal painting first, right? And then add the colors on top. And so the same thing works really well with oil pastel if you want to be doing realistic work. So, and I love this book. This was a great book, Creative Oil Painting. It's got several artists and it shows their way of painting in all different styles too. So, you know, this person starts with a sort of gray underpainting, and there was another artist in here that starts with a blue underpainting. And so that's one of the things that works really well too. So we want the black darks first, but softly, because the oil pastel is so strong if you go too dark. And you could always add more dark after. And then on the shade side, we tend to get cool tones as well. So, and it's nice in oil paintings and drawings to kind of play between the warm and the cool tones. So then we might say, okay, let's add some cool tones on the shade side. And again, really soft, right? Because otherwise it'll kind of overpower the drawing. And of course, it's going to depend on your style too, right? So you might put a little blue where we want it the darkest, right? Or thing that I love using violets when I'm toning faces. I think violet looks really good as a shade color in skin, where blue can look a little insipid. But you could use greens too, because flesh tones are warm and peachy, right? And if you use the complementary color to the reds that are in the face, that can work well too. And it depends on your style and what sort of look you're after, right? So again, just adding very softly at this point, where you want your shadows with the cool colors and the darker colors, right? So instead of just picking up the color you want right off, and you could use, if you wanted a more earthy look, you could also do a brown, like black and brown underpainting, which is what they did in the Renaissance, right? But I find I like a little more interesting color, so I like having the cools underneath. That's a choice for an artist to make, right? So let's say we're going to now start adding in a little more toning of the other colors now. So you basically do that. It might take a little more time than that. But let's say I want to start toning this thing. So shade side of the face. I might want to get a few warm tones in there too, but maybe we should start a little more conventionally though. So we'll start with some ochre. So this is the shade side of the face, so we don't want it too bright, right? So maybe we'll ochre. I think we'll have to blend it. So the idea is that you put the darks underneath and then you start rubbing on top with your lighter color and blending. That's a little more tricky with you know, a portrait than it might be, I don't know, an apple or a cup. Like basically, if I was going to do an apple, you know, or something round like a ball, I put the tone on one side, and then I start. Let's see. Yeah, I could make that ball. Start on my clean spot first, maybe, and then I start rubbing over. And this is where we start to push hard, and you're blending on top with the lighter color, and the black comes through, and you see I'm just rubbing back and forth, and it starts to pull up that darker color and blend it right on the page. You can start to create the tone like that. And you've got some decent pastels here. So I don't buy the cheapest ones because they don't blend very well. But these are pretty nice and pretty creamy. The really expensive ones are really awesome to use. It's amazing. You can just keep layering and layering on top, and they do just great. And they're more opaque too, which is nice with the, but man, the good ones can be quite pricey. So see how it pulled up the color from underneath, right? So that you want to kind of think about, well, what colors do I want underneath before you go on top with your light color? So I might say, well, you know, to make this face look a little more healthy, I might want, well, maybe I should put a little bit of oranges and pinks. Again, just lightly underneath, so that the person looks more healthy. And some of the rich tones that you might want, right? Maybe I'll put a little bit of red. So just kind of cross-hatching almost, or scribbling on. There's lots of different styles you could use too. I mean, you could use a more, you know, patchy, brushstrokey kind of way of putting it on, right? So again, it depends what sort of feels right to you as a style. And then taking the lighter color. And again, and it depends on your style. You could keep it being scribbly, or you can blend those colors from underneath. So you can see why you'd want to use the black sparingly, because it can really start to overpower the drawing, right? That's why we put it on really light. Otherwise, it's just so strong. So, and you can blend as much as you want or not, right? So that's one approach to use. So that's sort of a standard just drawing on kind of approach, right? And so I'd say I want maybe just a soft blue under here, just to create roundness in the eye. Maybe a soft gray eye, white of the eye. Using white maybe here where the highlight would be. Maybe I'll use cream on the other side. Layer on top. Maybe she'll have brown eyes. Or he, I don't actually know. This is a guy at this point. And then you could use your smaller pastels for detail, right? Etc. You can build lighter colors on top. So this is sort of a relatively conventional approach to oil pastel. Okay. By the darks underneath and blending the lights on top. So that's one way that you might enjoy. You can also blend on top with your finger if you want to make smooth. You can use a rubber stylus too, you know, those rubber tip things. You can, some people like to blend with a brush and some, how do you call it, thinner. I don't think it's really necessary though. And there's other ways to blend using palette knives as well. So we're gonna look at some other techniques. Did you bring your plastic palette knives? Because they're really nice to use rather than the metal ones. Do you have any other shapes or sizes? I think you do then. Look how rich this can look when you layer your colors in. It feels so good. You're going to enjoy this. So, you know, you'd continue to do what you have to do to pull this thing together, right? I just love how easy it is compared to painting. But it can be quite, it can become quite painterly too, in that we could do just that, but we can also draw back into it with a palette knife, and we can blend it with a palette knife. So if you want to create smooth blends using it, the sort of the flat side of palette knife. And I rather like the plastic ones with paperworks, just because it doesn't scratch it back off as much. It's a little softer. So if you do want to create smooth blends, you can just kind of rub it down. And so where people in the past would use a little bit of thinner, but these days a lot of people are wanting to stay away from, you know, all those you know, toxic substances. And I found that, you know, the palette knife just rubbing across will create nice blends. So, and then the other thing that is kind of fun to do too when you're making an artwork is to actually scrape, put some on and then scrape it back off. So you can get quite an interesting textures and be able to work through the layers. So that what I've seen some students do with this kind of method, I mean, it's a little bit wasteful, but you could always reuse the clumps somewhere else and start to use it like a paint, right? But what some people like to do with this kind of technique, they'll say, okay, I'm going to do an underdrawing with some colors first. Have some fun with that. And then scrape it back. So now it becomes an underpainting. You see how it sticks to the paper, but now I don't have any of the sticky stuff anymore, right? So that means that I can have my underpainting, because you'll see as you start working with it, you see how I can't put any more on top. Unless I have the really expensive pastels, I can't, it gets too slippery. I can't put it on top. So if you want to make an underpainting, you can put it on, scrape it back, and then say, now I can draw on top with my other colors so that I can get something that sticks on top. And it gives you just more repertoire of lines and techniques that you can build with, right? So it's kind of fun that way. So, now the other thing that's cool with palette knives is we can also scrape away drawing. So we can start to, yeah, maybe we want to, maybe let's say the person's old or something, or we just want an interesting style. And see how drawing can become part of it, or just building up textures and layers. So it's kind of cool, right? And that's where some people like, instead of working on white, like to work on black, because if you, let's say we want to, maybe we are building up this person. Instead, we'd be using the black of the paper, building up the highlights of the person, right? So we draw, where's the light that we see? Leave the dark, so instead of putting the black on first, you're just using the black of the paper, drawing our highlights. Right. And you can mix all your colors and all of that you want, like we were doing, right? I don't want to take too long or use up too much of your pastel, so I'm going to do this quicker than I would if it were my own drawing. Okay. So, and I probably would blend some different colors in there. And so I'm going to just develop one section of it, okay? So have some fun, get it on nice and thick eventually. So same way, you would start a little bit soft, blend all your different colors, right? Build it up. Light. Start to build up the whites and the highlights. Whatever style kind of suits you. You can be, I like kind of starting with a bit of cross-hatchy strokes, just so I can blend all my colors, right? But it can be any style that feels appropriate to you, whether it's, you know, you could cut this on an angle, and so it's a big sort of stroke like we were looking at there. So you can get a bigger mark laid on. And you could experiment with what style feels right to you, right? Time to build it up, etc. I'm going to get a little bit more on there just to show you the techniques. I'm just going to add a bit more in a few spots. And so you can still do all the blending. So I find blend with a lighter color and pull up on the darker colors from underneath tends to work really well. Okay. And you let it get kind of creamy, and you start to pull it up. And then let's say you want to come back. So I would put more on than that. But then you want to say, okay, now I want to add some drawing lines. See how when you start to come back and scrape away, you start to get the dark line that shows, right? So it's kind of a cool technique. And you can also, I learned this from another artist. She actually uses metal palette knives. She even takes her sticks and crumbles them, and she puts these clumps. So I'm not going to do too much of that because I don't want to use up all your pastel. But let's say I'll just try one. So with one of the sharper palette knives, you can have a clump. So she would do, you know, her layers. Like, let's say I'm going to work on this one. She's got her layers of stuff she's been playing with, and then she'd take chunks of it and she would just sort of smash it on with her palette knife, and, you know, and scrape off and then draw again like I did there, and, you know, and just mess around with it, kind of as if it's paint. You see all the interesting textures you can get when you do that. It's pretty cool, right? So imagine the fun you can have with this technique, so that we don't have to think of it the way we might, you know, I don't know, the crayons we used when we were kids, or chalk pastel. It's quite, you can be very painterly with it, you see? So can you imagine some cool stuff you could do with that? Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, and any style, but I love the idea of using the palette knife like that. Can you see how, as you manipulate it, how really interesting textures you get so easily compared to using paint, right? So, and I love that you bought these nice chunky ones, because it gives you a little more freedom to do that. So you can explore the different palette knives and what they do for you. You see how you can put on, draw away, leave scraping marks, put some more back on again. So it's really how you can create misty looking images, or it's really playful. So I can't wait to see what you can create with that. So, and it's opaque enough that it will hold its own. So, you know, I find that these are pretty nice quality. They don't stick on top of each other very well just in drawing, but the palette knife kind of helps you to get it to stick on top. Did you see that? So that if I want to add more on top of here, I might want to do it that way. You might want to grab it off the stick and apply it on, because just drawing it on, it doesn't want to stick. The higher quality ones do. They're very opaque and you can just keep going and going. But like my set, it is only probably, it's not, I don't know how many sets this is, 12. This is what, 24 or something. I think I have maybe about 16 colors. It cost me $75. They're awesome how wonderful they color on top. But, so yours are nice though. They're decent. I think you'll enjoy seeing what you can do with them. So that's what I invite you to do, is to play with it a bit, not to always be conventional, but what if I do this? What kind of mark does it make? You know, what if I make a printing mark of all of these different colors? And then what if I were to smear over that with my palette knife, right? What would that do? You know, or what if I rub it with my finger? What does that do? You know, allow yourself to play with it a bit, right? So, okay. Now, they get dirty, so all you have to do is just take like a napkin or something and just rub off the black. So that, and this is when I'm doing a portrait, ideally, what I'm going to do, I'll build up where the darks are very softly, my cool tones, some of my other color patches, and then I'm going to start in the light side with my clean sticks, and then move into the dark, because it starts to pick up the dark and you don't want to make smeary mess, right? So, and then when you know you've been in the dark area, you want to go into clean, a lighter area, just wipe it off with a paper towel, and then keep going. Yeah. So, and you can see that these get dirty too, so you just give them a wipe. That's one thing I do like about the metal. It stays a little cleaner than it just wipes off a little bit easier than the plastic ones, but so. And I find that using a relatively heavy or stiff paper is also helpful, so that you can, you know, scrape away and something. It has a little bit of absorbency, but not too much, because I find I like to be able to scrape back away. So if I have a harder paper, I can scrape back without leaving it. In fact, sometimes I'll put like an ink, like an India ink drawing underneath first, like in black, then it gets nice and slick and I can scrape it back off. You might enjoy papers like Yupo. Have you ever heard of Yupo paper? It's kind of like a plastic paper or polyester paper. And in fact, there's a type of paper that's meant for oil painting that's inert, like the oils won't break it down. So ideally, we're using a treated paper or mylar or something that's meant for oil. But it's still okay to use regular paper. It just doesn't have archival quality. And you can also put gesso on your paper, like you do for the paintings, right? Where you were working with your acrylic, and draw on top of that too. So, all right. So now here's an example of, this was chalk pastel underneath as a sort of painting base, and then spray fixative, and it's on sandpaper, and then oil pastel on top. So kind of cool. So you see what we're creating is underpainting and then layers on top, right? So, and you can see how you can pull up. And this was very quickly done. I probably would do a little bit more to that. And you can see some scraping away here too. So it's kind of fun techniques. All right. So do you want to give that a try and play around with it a little? Okay. And then we could, yeah, this guy looks really crazy. Now that I see his eyes way down here, should be a fire. But, you know, you can create sort of a shifty-eyed look. And I think kind of some of these frenetic marks can help this person look kind of disturbed, right? Yeah, I mean, it seems sort of wasteful sometimes putting it on, taking it off, but, you know, look at the cool marks you can make. It's just so fun. It's neat stuff. So, right, so your turn to have a little fun. So just try it out a little bit, even with something simple, and then you want to look at your painting as well, right? You want to do that today as well? Yes? Did you bring any examples of what you were working on? No? Okay. Well, let's start with letting you play with this a little bit, and then we'll look at your painting, okay? So, your turn. Let's see what you create with it.